Months ago, Democrat Stacey Abrams ended her campaign and said she cannot win, but still wouldn't call it a concession speech in her hard-fought effort to overtake Republican Brian Kemp in the Georgia governor's race. In fiery remarks, Abrams claimed democracy failed Georgia, but added she will no longer stand in the way of officials certifying Kemp as the winner. Meantime, in Florida, they're doing it the old-fashioned way tonight. A hand recount of votes underway to find out who won the U.S. Senate race in the state. While the governor's race appears over after a machine recount and will be officially certified next week, Republican Ron DeSantis has declared victory for the second time. But the Democrat in that race, Andrew Gillum, retracted his concession earlier this week and has not conceded again, vowing as of a couple hours ago to fight on. We have Fox team coverage. Peter Ducey at the Broward County election headquarters again tonight with the Florida story. But we start off with the breaking news. Steve Harrigan in Atlanta with a very confusing message from Stacey Abrams. Good evening, Steve.
Ray, you're exactly right. This was a fiery, angry speech by Stacey Abrams and a little bit puzzling as well. She acknowledged that she lost the governor's race in Georgia to Brian Kemp. Kemp got 50.2% of the vote. He had a lead of about 50,000 votes out of 4 million cast. So Kemp really just managed to avoid a runoff election. Had he dipped under 50%, that would have happened next month. He avoided that. Abrams, till the very end, tried to gather and prove she had 17,000 more votes coming. She was unable to do that. So she gives her concession speech and at the same time says it's not really a concession. Here's Abrams.
To watch an elected official who claims to represent the people in the state baldly pin his hopes for election on the suppression of the people's democratic right to vote has been truly appalling. So let's be clear. This is not a speech of concession.
It certainly didn't sound like a typical concession speech either. Abrams said in a concession speech, you're supposed to say nice things about the race and the other candidate. She was having none of that. She said the state had failed Georgia. She said democracy had failed the voters in Georgia. And she said there was voter suppression across the state. And she blamed Brian Kemp, who was the chief election officer, the Secretary of State. She said he ran a vicious campaign. As for Kemp himself, who has been working with transition officials, earlier he said Abrams was having temper tantrums, but his tone has changed dramatically after this press conference by Abrams. Kemp issued the following statement: I appreciate her passion, hard work, and commitment to public service. So what we're seeing now is really a bitter end to a very bitter fight in a really closely contested contest in Georgia. Abrams, just 44 years old, will now be a private citizen, but we could likely see her in future races for governor or senator in Georgia. Brett, back to you.
And Steve, just to clarify, there's no phone call we know of between the two campaigns?
It also is lacking the traditional phone call. The Kemp team learned about it from this concession speech, which was not a concession speech.
All right, Steve Harrigan live in Atlanta. Steve, thank you. There is also plenty of uncertainty in Florida tonight. A hand recount of ballots for Senate moves toward resolution, one vote at a time. Correspondent Peter Ducey is in Lauderhill, Florida right now. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Brett. There are still 5,700 outstanding mailed ballots with improper signatures that could be fixed by 5 p.m. tomorrow. That is according to a spreadsheet just posted by Bill Nelson's lawyer. But 5,700 is less than half as many as they need to win because their vote total isn't exactly being beefed up by the recount.
At the hand recount, there was a lot of head scratching. Like, who did this person prefer when he or she voted for both Rick Scott and Bill Nelson? Or what exactly does this bubble on the right mean? Then, did this person know that none of the candidates live at the Magic Kingdom when writing in Mickey Mouse? Things got really hazy in Columbia County when Democrats reportedly argued a vote for Willie Nelson could be for Bill Nelson. Despite the confusion, RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel saw nothing improper in Broward County.
So I sat at a table table doing the hand recount. I will tell you, it was very fair. There was no dissension. Everybody was getting along.
Democrat Bill Nelson's lawyer posted a photo of a contested ballot and wrote that this is why we have manual recounts. But there's a math problem for Nelson. Most ballots in Broward put on the projector today for review looked like this one. The Senate race was blank. It's called an undervote, and it doesn't go to either candidate, making it harder for Nelson to make up the more than 12,000 votes he needs to catch Scott. A Scott spokesman said today Bill Nelson has served the country and the state of Florida for decades, but his D.C. lawyers don't care about his legacy. All they care about is changing Florida's election laws ahead of the 2020 presidential race. There's no sign Nelson will drop out, though. Instead, he's digging in, asking supporters for money with an appeal that says about opponent Rick Scott, his team will spend countless millions more, file frivolous lawsuits, and cry voter fraud over and over again to come out on top. So we have to fight back. Now, to do that, we need your help. Brenda Snipes doesn't want any help. Broward County's election supervisor is unfazed, even though the state didn't recognize her machine recount results because they were sent 2 minutes late.
We accomplished what was almost an unbelievable task.
But Republican Rick Scott's team believes Broward County turned in results to be rejected on purpose to wipe out machine recount losses by the Democrat Nelson.
The same staff that successfully uploaded Broward County's results to the state website on Saturday somehow forgot how to upload results to the website by Thursday. I'm just not buying it.
It's going to be a long night here in Broward County. The canvassing board still has 7 bins of ballots to go through, and they've got to decide whether each one belongs to Nelson or Scott or nobody. They've got to do it one at a time. All the while, lawyers for both sides are sitting in folding chairs, just waiting to spring up with an objection at any time. Brett?
Okay, we'll continue to watch that. Meantime, in the governor's race, the machine recount has been finished. Ron DeSantis finished up 33,000 plus votes ahead of Andrew Gillum. But Gillum, just within the past few hours, said on Twitter the deadline has been extended. So make sure to check your vote by mail and provisional ballot by Saturday, 5 p.m. And is instructing people, count every vote. Our path forward is clear. It suggests that even though he conceded once, took that back, he's not ready to concede again yet.
No, and he's using these social media accounts that helped fuel his rise here in Florida to tell everybody to check to make sure that their mail ballot or provisional ballot has not been disqualified because of a faulty signature. But again, that only deals with several thousand votes, far fewer than he needs to come back to overtake Ron DeSantis in first place. But it doesn't sound like we're going to hear anything close to a concession from him or Bill Nelson until at the very earliest tomorrow at 5. But it really doesn't sound like there's going to be any action until some court challenges that could come on Tuesday when the Secretary of State tries to certify these races.
And that's
Brett?
the big day, Tuesday the 20th. Well, a lot going on. Peter Ducey down in Florida. Thank you. Ohio Democratic Congressman, meantime, Marcia Fudge says she will decide after Thanksgiving whether to challenge Nancy Pelosi for the job of House Speaker in the next Congress. The two women met this morning for about 45 minutes. Fudge called that session a very open and frank discussion and said some Democrats want new leadership because they feel left out and left behind. Pelosi called.
And you know why it's going to be just fine? Because there was no collusion.
Again, describing the special counsel's investigation as a witch hunt, the president tweeted of Mueller and his team, quote, "They are screaming and shouting at people, horribly threatening them to come up with the answers they want. They are a disgrace to our nation and don't care how many lives they ruin." When asked this afternoon what specifically prompted that outburst, the president says it's just the continuation of the Mueller investigation, which he says should have never happened. Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker now oversees that probe. Before taking that job, he was critical of the special counsel. Some congressional Republicans are pushing the White House to soon submit an Attorney General nominee.
I think a lot of the questions involving Mr. Whitaker and the acting AG could be eliminated if we had a nominee. And my understanding is the White House is starting to look into that, but I don't have any, as I told you this morning, don't have any indication of timeline or who the candidates are.
Senator Cornyn says he suspects a commitment to protect Mueller's investigation will be front and center during the nominee's confirmation hearing. Once the president submits his written answers to the special counsel, it's unclear what happens next. Indictments or evidence against those close to the president or information damaging enough Democrats push impeachment through the House. Though if Mueller's report falls short of more indictments or strong indications of collusion, House Democrats would have to weigh whether impeachment is worth the risk, given the political consequences of the last presidential impeachment. A source tells Fox News the president did not submit his answers today to the special counsel. Also at the White House this afternoon, the president announced he is nominating Andrew Wheeler as his administrator to the Environmental Protection Agency. Wheeler is acting in that role now. Brett.
Rich Edson live on the North Lawn. Rich, thank you. As Rich mentioned, President Trump recognized 7 extraordinary Americans with the Presidential Medal of Freedom today. It is the government's highest civilian honor. The list posthumously dealt with Elvis Presley, Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, and Babe Ruth, plus 2 football greats, Roger Staubach of Dallas Cowboys fame and Naval Academy class of 1965, retired Minnesota Supreme Court Justice and former NFL star Alan Page, as well as retiring Utah Senator Orrin Hatch and Republican donor Miriam Adelson, wife of casino magnate Sheldon Adelson. President Trump has a message for the media: behave or else. This comes as a judge orders the administration to at least temporarily end its freeze-out of a CNN reporter. Fox News media analyst and host of Fox's Media Buzz, Howard Kurtz, tells us what this all means tonight.
What began as a press conference clash between President Trump and his least favorite reporter at his least favorite network morphed into a major legal test of press freedom. And in a preliminary ruling today, CNN and White House correspondent Jim Acosta won that test for now. 3 days after CNN filed suit over a White House decision to suspend Acosta's credentials, federal Judge Timothy Kelly ordered the pass restored while the case proceeds. The Trump appointee said he wasn't ruling on whether the White House violated Acosta's First Amendment rights after last week's dust-up.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am.
Excuse me. That's enough. CNN should be ashamed of itself having you working for them. You are a rude, terrible person.
In the suit, backed by Fox News and a dozen other major news outlets, the judge found the White House violated Acosta's due process, saying the decision was shrouded in mystery and shifting explanations, abandoning a claim that Acosta laid hands on the intern reaching for the mic. In an interview with Chris Wallace that will air on Fox News Sunday, the president downplayed the decision.
What they said, though, is that we have to create rules and regulations for conduct, et cetera, et cetera. We're doing that. We're going to write them up right now. It's not a big deal. And if he misbehaves, we'll throw him out, or we'll stop the news conference, or somebody else. I'm not just saying about Acosta. CNN writes very fake news.
But CNN cast it as a victory for the news business.
I want to thank all of my colleagues in the press who supported us this week. And I want to thank the judge for the decision he made today.
The judge did not address whether Acosta's conduct was rude or disruptive, but with the reporter back at the White House today, it was at least a symbolic win for the press over the president. Brett?
We'll see where this goes from here. Howie, thank you. Up next, is WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange a step closer to appearing in a U.S. courtroom? That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. For the week, the Dow lost 2.25 percentage points. The S&P 500 was down 1 2/3. The Nasdaq finished off a little over 2. A California National Guardsman is being accused of trying to smuggle 3 Mexicans into the U.S. USA Today reports Private Edward Acosta Avila was charged after being arrested over the weekend near San Diego. The Mexicans were allegedly hiding in the back seat of a car being driven by Acosta Avila when it was stopped by Border Patrol. No comment so far from his attorney. There are new reports tonight that WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange could end up in a U.S. courtroom sometime soon. His name has appeared in what was apparently a mistakenly released document unrelated to the very serious charges Assange could face. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge explains tonight.
No other procedure is likely to keep confidential the fact that Assange has been charged. The proposed order would need to remain sealed until Assange is arrested. 6 years ago, Assange sought refuge in London's Ecuadorian embassy, fearing arrest and prosecution. Speculation about his status grew after media reporting Ecuador and Britain want to remove him. In 2010, then Army Private Bradley Manning gave WikiLeaks more than 750,000 classified and sensitive U.S. government cables. And more recently, the website posted hacked emails from the DNC and Clinton campaign during the 2016 election.
Oh, we love WikiLeaks.
Well, then candidate Trump praised them. After the election, his CIA director labeled the operation treasonous.
It's time to call out WikiLeaks for what it really is. a non-state hostile intelligence service often abetted by state actors like Russia.
In a statement, WikiLeaks said the U.S. indictment of Assange is a grave violation of press freedoms. The wild card is how the Assange disclosure may impact Special Counsel Robert Mueller, whose investigators spent months probing WikiLeaks' contact with political operative Roger Stone, who seemed to boast about insider knowledge of the Clinton email hack.
The Obama administration considered charges, but was cautious about whether Assange and WikiLeaks qualified as a news organization. But the Trump administration has taken a more aggressive approach, Brett.
Catherine, thank you. Up next, get out your calculator. We'll tell you what the first ever audit of the Pentagon has discovered. First, beyond our borders tonight, thousands of Palestinians. North Korea's state-run news agency has named the American citizen as Bruce Byron Lawrence. It says he was detained October 16th for illegally entering the country from China. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back. The good news for lawmakers and government watchdogs who've been demanding a Pentagon audit for years, that audit is now complete. The bad news, the Pentagon failed. But the Defense Department is trying to put a positive spin on it. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin is at the Pentagon tonight to tell us how. Good evening, Jennifer.
Good evening, Brett. Since 1990, Congress required all government agencies to undergo an audit. The Pentagon resisted, arguing it was too big and unwieldy to comply. Last December, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis ordered the Pentagon's first ever audit, which has just been released. The headline, as you mentioned, is that the Pentagon failed its inaugural audit, but Pentagon officials say that is beside the point. Quote, "We failed the audit, but we never expected to pass it. We never thought we were going to pass an audit. Everyone was betting against us that we wouldn't even do the audit." The review found inventory discrepancies and that the Pentagon thought it owned certain buildings and installations that it no longer owns. It also found redundant military IT systems badly in need of better cybersecurity. The audit itself cost $413 million and was conducted by 1,200 auditors who visited 900 military sites. They examined $2.7 trillion in assets. The problems will cost an estimated $559 million to fix, according to the Pentagon. The chairman of the House Armed Services Committee said the audit should not be an excuse for arbitrary defense budget cuts.
So far, there's been no finding of fraud or any of that sort of thing. Mainly, the problem is that one set of financial or accounting systems cannot talk to another. I think the biggest surprise may be that the Pentagon does not actually own as many buildings as it thought it did.
The audit did not get into issues of waste like that found by airmen at Travis Air Force Base who figured out how to save taxpayer money when they learned that a special water kettle used on board warplanes cost a whopping $1,280. When the kettle's handles break, they now use a 3D printer to replicate replacement handles rather than buying new kettles. The Air Force is now using 3D printing to save millions of taxpayer dollars through 3D printing of parts for older aircraft as well. Brett?
Okay, Jennifer Griffin live at the Pentagon. Jennifer, thank you. Thousands of Navy and Marine Corps veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan who developed post-traumatic stress disorder were denied veterans benefits. They've been given the green light now to sue the military. A federal judge in Connecticut has certified a class action lawsuit against Navy Secretary Richard Spencer. The veterans with PTSD say they were unfairly given less than honorable discharges for minor infractions linked to their untreated mental health problems. A federal prosecutor has argued the plaintiffs could reapply for discharge upgrades under new rules put in place last year. Pressure is building tonight on Saudi Arabia to end the fighting against rebels in Yemen. The United Nations says 22 million Yemenis need some form of humanitarian assistance, and they're not getting it. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Amy Kellogg reports tonight, explaining how all of this intensified with the killing of that Saudi journalist.
The UN Security Council met today to try to come up with a plan for ending the war in Yemen. Calls for an end to hostilities have increased since the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Outrage over his death has led to a critical re-examination in Washington of Saudi Arabia's policies, particularly its campaign in Yemen to dislodge the Iranian-backed Houthi fighters. The U.S. has supported the Saudi-led coalition. Passions ran high on the Senate floor yesterday.
Since Secretary Pompeo said about 3 weeks ago that the Saudi coalition should quit bombing civilian centers, the Saudis have dropped 200 bombs on Hodeidah. Hodeidah is a city where most of the humanitarian effort and food comes in. I'm not for selling F-16s to Russia or to China, but I'm also not for selling any more to Saudi Arabia.
The head of the World Food Program visited the vital port city this week.
I'm here at this port today to send a very clear message to the world that we need to protect this port at all costs, make certain that it can function at the highest capacity, because if we don't, people are going to die.
Yemen is now on the verge of widespread famine. Half the population is at risk of starvation. Babies are dying.
Mothers, they cannot afford milk for their kids, so they bring the rice and boil it and take the white water of the rice and feed their kids as if it is a milk.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, in his recent call for a ceasefire, insisted that the Houthis must stop firing missiles at Saudi Arabia, and then subsequently the Saudis must stop bombing. The UN is trying to organize a meeting between the two sides in Sweden later this month, about which, at the moment, it is cautiously optimistic. Bret.
Amy Kellogg in Milan. Amy, thanks. When we come back, breaking news, we have a winner in the Georgia governor's race as the Democrat ends her challenge, but says it's not a concession. And we'll turn to Florida as well. Reaction from the panel after a break.
Failed Georgia. Georgians of every political party, every race, every region, again. This is not a speech of concession. Because concession means to acknowledge an action is right, true, or proper. As a woman of conscience and faith, I cannot concede that. But my assessment is the law currently allows no further viable remedy. I don't want to hold public office if I need to scheme my way into the post.
Stacey Abrams down in Georgia, essentially saying she can no longer win that race for governor. As you look at the vote total, she's still down by 54,000. The campaign there was hoping to get this under 50% for Brian Kemp, so they would force a runoff. That is not going to happen. She is not conceding. However, she is also not preventing the officials who have to certify the race from certifying it a winner in Brian Kemp, the Republican. Kemp said the election is over and hardworking Georgians are ready to move forward. We can no longer dwell on the divisive politics of the past, but must focus on Georgia's bright and promising future. Together, we will realize the opportunities and tackle the challenges to come. We will be a state that puts hardworking Georgians, no matter their zip code or political preference, first. What about this? We'll start there, go to Florida. Let's bring in our panel. Jonah Goldberg, senior editor at National Review. Susan Page, Washington bureau chief at USA Today. And national security analyst Morgan Ortagus. Jonah, that's a pretty fiery speech, not one that we haven't heard before.
It is, and you'll forgive my cynicism, but I think it's kind of outrageous. When Donald Trump said that he might not honor the results of the election if he lost, everyone rightly said that was an outrageous thing to say. Everyone is beating up on Donald Trump for violating democratic norms and all the rest, and for questioning the integrity of elections. This woman has done exactly that in fiery, prepared remarks. I think it is in part, look, there was bad hyperbole on both sides about a lot of these elections, but this is part of a strategy in Georgia to keep the base riled up, to change voter laws, and to make this argument that this state belongs to us, and it is all about preparing for future elections, and it is remarkably cynical and bad form.
There were allegations that the Secretary of State, Brian Kemp, who now will be governor-elect, by the Abrams campaign, allegations that he was somehow trying to squash the vote, to try to downplay turnout, to somehow hold people back from voting in certain areas. Specifically argued that it was African-American voters. There were allegations of that, but no real investigation that came forward with specifics that I know of. And yet, this speech at the end there, Susan.
I would say if you lose a race, you should concede a race, but I don't find it cynical. I mean, I think it is questionable that Mr. Kemp decided to continue to serve as Secretary of State and oversee the election in which he was a combatant. And that creates at the minimum, a problem with appearances. And there were federal court cases in which the actions that the Georgia State had taken with voters were found to have been the wrong course to take. So there are some legitimate questions raised about how voters were treated in Georgia. So I can understand why she feels strongly about this. You know, of course, Democrats are unhappy that they've lost that race because that was a very closely contested race and an historic one, the first African-American woman nominated by a major party for governor. But Republicans might be concerned that she came so close in a state that it's been decades since Democrats have won the governorship.
Sure, but if you look at the focus, the biggest focus of this midterm as far as the stars on the Democratic side, Stacey Abrams, Andrew Gillum in Florida, probably Beto O'Rourke in Texas, it looks like they're all going to go down. Speaking of Florida, the Senate race is still 12,000 votes, Rick Scott and Bill Nelson. The governor's race, 33,000 plus votes, and the hand recount for the Senate race, but the machine recount's over, but Andrew Gillum's not conceding either. He conceded once, took it back, and now not conceding again.
There's so many parallels with what's going on in the elections, post-election, I guess, at this point in Florida and Georgia. And as you said, I think what we really saw on election night is while we had big Democrat gains, it was among more of the moderate wing of the party. The Bernie wing of the party, the far left of the party, did not come out a winner on election night. And actually, right after the primaries in Florida, which I, study Florida closely, having worked there for so long and lived there, I described it as the primary, the general election that was the first test of the Trump and Bernie voter, especially in a state like Florida. And we've seen also in Georgia, you had two pretty fringe candidates. I mean, I don't think either one of them fall into the mainstream. It was something that you heard moderate voters in Georgia complain about quite a bit. So I think when you're looking at both Florida and Georgia, you're seeing the Democrat Party choose people in primaries, and very contested primaries, by the way. It's not like the two of them walked away with these primaries. You saw them choose fringe far-left candidates. The Republicans chose pretty far-right candidates as well. And in both of those states, voters chose the fringe right over the fringe left.
Yeah, and we'll see what comes out with these recounts. It doesn't look like they're going to move a lot of votes to change the dynamic in Florida. I was going to talk about the Mueller investigation, what the president said about it, about the acting attorney general, but just in the past few minutes, the Washington Post has moved a piece that says the CIA concludes Saudi Crown Prince ordered Jamal Khashoggi's assassination. The Saudi journalist killed in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. If true, and we haven't independently confirmed this, one would think there's a lot of pressure on the administration to have some kind of different answer. John.
Yeah, I think there is. I imagine that Donald Trump is having an interesting conversation with Mike Pompeo about all of this. And I think it should prompt a different approach to the way we've been dealing with the Saudis. This was so obviously a planned assassination from the top levels of power in Saudi Arabia. And you can't say, oh, we just have to protect our interests and define our interests solely as arms sales. We have other interests, including the rule of law and the idea that you're not supposed to murder journalists who are inconvenient.
Quickly, Susan.
Yeah, I agree. Not a surprise, but certainly puts pressure on the administration to do more than it's done to respond to this.
Yeah, I totally concur with the two of them, and I think it is. It's almost time to relook at our Middle East policy, writ large. I mean, we're continuing to see just, thousands of people still out of Syria, still can't get into their homes, no resolution there. And as we sort of pivot to China and Russia from a national security perspective, it's time to rethink our entire strategy in the Middle East.
All right, many discussions to come on all of that. Next up, the Friday lightning round, California wildfires, CNN versus Trump, plus winners and losers, if we'll get to it all.
Could be as many as 600 people killed, up by 400. It's incredible what's going on, and burned beyond recognition.
You got some blowback because one of your tweets was you said there's poor forest management.
Only because I tell the truth. When trees fall, they get very dry. They're like tinder. They're like matchsticks, right? You got to remove them.
What about the argument it's climate change, that it's drier, it's hotter, and that's contributing to it?
Maybe it contributes a little bit. The big problem we have is management. We need forest management. We have to take care of all the dead wood that's so dry.
Part of the interview with Chris Wallace that airs Sunday on Fox News Sunday, the president talking about forest management. The stats from the wildfires out in California are horrific. 66 people killed all throughout the state in the different fires. There's some 600 plus still missing, 631 from the Camp Fire alone. What about all this? We'll start there with the lightning round. Jonah.
No, it's terrible. Presumably that 600 number will come down because it's a lot of people who just haven't phoned in. I think that the thing that gets to me the most is just how much, when this country is actually pressed in a crisis, how normal people rise to the occasion to help each other out. Some of that stuff is, makes me feel like there's a lot of pollen in the air when I watch it.
It's amazing. We're going to continue to cover it. The president's obviously going out to California as well. All right, second story on the lightning round here. CNN versus the president. A judge temporarily ruling that Jim Acosta can have his White House credential back. The Justice Department just this hour releasing a statement. We are disappointed with the district court's decision. The president has broad authority to regulate access to the White House, including to ensure fair and orderly White House events and press conferences. We look forward to continuing to defend the White House's lawful actions from the DOJ. Interesting. The president said they're going to come up with new rules today. Susan?
Well, and, of course, the president can call on whomever he wants to call on. He can choose not to call on Jim Acosta or anybody from CNN if that's what he wants. The White House can try to set rules of behavior. But what the White House cannot do is pull the credentials of a legitimate reporter because he doesn't like that reporter's questions or approach. And you know what? If showboating disqualified you from serving in the White House press corps, half that room would be empty.
The president saying that decorum will run the day in these new rules. We'll see what that looks like. Morgan.
After Watergate, Nixon very famously banned Washington Post reporters not from being on the premise. They just could not go anywhere in the White House but the press briefing room. And thanks to the Smithsonian, I found my favorite historical fact. William McKinley had a bad relationship with the Washington Post, and he actually had a yellow-headed Mexican parrot that he named Washington Post, and he made it serve as the official greeter to the White House. So perhaps in his approach with Jim Acosta, the president should get a parrot or a monkey or something.
All right, there we go. Let's do winners and losers. Winner first or loser first, whichever one. Quickly.
Well, I'll just be negative Nancy and start with loser. So Theresa May, clearly it's been an incredibly tough week. I've been following Brexit closely for the past 6 months. It's been very cantankerous negotiations. But what we saw is whenever she presented the Brexit deal, not only did she lose several ministers, there's a chance that she may even lose her seat as Prime Minister. Luckily, the good news is there's an outside chance that we might have a second British referendum on Brexit.
All right, winner?
Winner is the First Ladies, both of our most recent First Ladies, Michelle Obama and Melania Trump. Michelle Obama had a very successful book launch this week, over 725,000 sold on the first day. An interview with Oprah got a lot of great press. You also saw Melania Trump exercise and get the Deputy National Security Advisor fired. So both women showed that they are more than just beautiful side piece.
Winner and loser?
Loser, Beto O'Rourke, all that hype and yet he lost. Winner, Beto O'Rourke. All that hype, built a national reputation, has a list now of 800,000 people who contributed to his campaign, now part of the national conversation.
Lightning, winner and loser?
Michael Avenatti, for all the obvious reasons. Martha McSally would get it, but she did lose the election. Instead, it goes to Boomer, her fantastic dog, who proves the most important things are outside of politics.
There you go. We'll end with Boomer. Thank you, panel. When we come back, notable quotables.